Hello and welcome or welcome back to Unwinding Minds. Today we're going to talk about something that I see every day in my line of work, a poor sense of self, and how this often shows up in the lives of autistic adults. Whether you're autistic yourself or supporting someone who is on the ASD spectrum, this topic can feel complex, a little bit floaty even, but we'll ramble through the heathers together in this episode. Let's begin with a simple and obvious question. What is a sense of self? This may seem like a really obvious thing, but we need to make sure that we're on the same page as we dive into the topic together. A sense of self is essentially how we understand who we are, our identity, our values, our preferences, our inner compass. It's that internal voice that says, "This is me. These are the things that I believe in. These are the things that I like about myself, others, and the world around me." For many people, this develops gradually over time through experiences, relationships, and self-reflection, but not for everyone. Particularly for autistic people, this development can sometimes be disrupted, delayed, or just deeply confusing, and that's what we're going to explore together today. What does it feel like when we have a poor sense of self? An unstable or poor sense of self in autism might show up in subtle or in profound ways, and it can absolutely impact your relationship with yourself, the world around you, the people around you, or yourself. You might recognize some of these experiences, feeling like you're mirroring other people to fit in, struggling to identify your own likes, dislikes, or even your opinions, finding it difficult to make decisions without outside input, frequently changing your identity, your style, your interest for lots of reasons, or a sense of emptiness or feeling lost without external structure or validation. In fact, research suggests that autistic adults are significantly more likely to report difficulties with identity formation. One 2021 study found that over 60% of adults surveyed felt they lacked a clear sense of self. That's a huge number, and you are not alone if this resonates with you. There can be big feelings of shame or disappointment in ourselves if we're in this camp of people, but you're not alone. A lot of people are silently going through this. One often overlooked aspect of autism that can shape identity is something called a diffuse sense of self. This simply means that a person's understanding of who they are, what they feel, think, believe, might feel more fluid or harder to pin down at times. For many autistic individuals, it can be challenging to separate the inner world from the expectations or emotions of others, which can make discovering and holding on to a strong sense of self feel like an ongoing journey or impossible mission. I want to address a common experience I see when I'm working with certain autistic clients, particularly those who are perceived as high functioning. The idea of high functioning is not necessarily one I gel with personally, because in my view it's largely a neurotypical label describing outward behaviours, which is focused on your outward ability to have and apply social or cognitive based skills in a way that a neurotypical person might, for example. Many clients I see who are labelled as high functioning are not necessarily at a higher level of cognition. Instead, they process information differently and internalize their struggles very deeply. Their visible behaviors may seem less severe or extreme externally, but they often face significant internal challenges with thoughts, feelings, and their perception of the world. Challenges that are not immediately apparent to other people. The thing about the autistic community is that so much of the research conducted on autistic people has historically been done so by neurotypical people. So, in my humble opinion, which you can freely ignore, a difficulty in really understanding what causes autistic people to behave in certain ways, because a lot of it is looking at the external manifestation of behavior rather than the internal expression of how the behaviors feel and why it feels that way to the individual. But I appreciate that I've gone off topic a little here onto a tangent in true ADHD fashion. The topic of the video is around sense of self in neurodivergence, and particularly in autism. I find this difficulty with sense of self so consistently in clients with ASD that I really think it's worth elucidating on much more. In order to understand this better, it does help to explore some of the science. So buckle up. This is the more boring bit for most people, at least. If you're anything like me, there's going to be a deep interest in the why behind the poor sense of self. But if you're not as interested in this, or if it's overwhelming, feel free to skip over it. From my reading around, I've come to understand that some of the reasons for poor sense of self are to do with cognition, with socialization, and the brain itself. You may not be familiar with the idea of theory of mind, so let me just briefly explain it. Put in crudely simple terms, the theory of mind is the ability to understand that other people have their own thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and intentions that may be really quite different from your own. It helps us to predict and interpret the behavior of others in social situations. In autism, difficulties with theory of mind can make it harder to read social cues or understand others' perspectives. Cognitive theories suggest that enduring mind blindness or impairments in the theory of mind disrupt a person's ability to attribute mental states to oneself as reliably as to others. That weakens the introspective awareness and self-understanding. That's a mouthful. So essentially, it's this. Autistic individuals may find it harder to reflect on their own thoughts and feelings in the same way that other people do. There is more science to explore that might help us to understand these differences further. Brain scans have shown differences in areas of the brain linked to self-awareness and memory. And these differences can make it more difficult to build a strong sense of identity over time. These areas of the brain which show altered connectivity include the default mode network. Anatomically speaking, that's the medial frontoparietal network. But that isn't as catchy. On brain scans of people with ASD, there's been shown to be reduced activity in the self-referential brain areas, which underpin autobiographical memory and self-reflective processing. Now, in combination with things like alexithymia or a difficulty in conceptualizing one's own emotions, and with a diffuse sense of self, we can see a picture starting to form. Not only is there a difficulty in processing memories about yourself, there's also a difficulty with introspection and a difficulty with processing your feelings. Put all that together, and that's a recipe for struggling to maintain a stable sense of self-identity. And it's often a big challenge for adults with ASD. Okay, I probably bombarded you with science for a little bit too long there and waffled. So let's go back to talking about how these difficulties actually affect autistic people and other potential causes kind of more broadly. There are a lot of social factors externally that make this problem much more pronounced. There isn't one neat answer as to why autistic people struggle a lot with sense of self, but there are some other common contributing factors worth talking about together. First of all, masking. I talk about this all the time. You probably predicted this being here. Autistic people often learn to hide or suppress their natural behaviours to fit in socially, which can distance them from their authentic selves. There's also social rejection. Repeated invalidation or exclusion can erode confidence in one's identity. If you feel constantly othered, you begin to question yourself and who you are, and whether it's right or wrong to be who you are. And late diagnosis is another factor. Many autistic adults grow up without understanding why they feel so different, which leads to internalized shame, confusion, and isolation. There's also black and white thinking. This is a common autistic trait that can make self-reflection feel like a puzzle with only one right answer, rather than a multi-layered complex combination of factors that form your identity. And another thing is sensory differences. Struggling to interpret interoception, aka the internal bodily cues you get, that can make it harder to tune into how we actually feel. And those are just some of the layers of the problem around forming an identity or a strong sense of self in ASD. Comment down below out of curiosity if you can think of more. I would really like to hear different perspectives on this. I'm not a doctor, and I also don't have all of the answers. Plus, it gets really tiring hearing only your own thoughts on things. It's good to share and to learn. If all of this feels like incredibly familiar, then it may be that you're in a place of wanting to form a stronger sense of self and identity. There's a lot of ways to do this, so let's explore some of them together. There are gentle ways to work through these feelings, as complex as they are, so as I said, we'll identify some together. I'm going to start with one that I like. Write it down. Do some self-discovery through journaling. You can also try exploring questions like, what makes me feel peaceful? What makes me feel happy? When do I feel most like myself? What are my sensory likes and dislikes? My advice, keep it low pressure. You're not writing a novel, just tuning into your experience and wants. There's no right or wrong way to do it. Next, you can experiment without judgment. That involves giving yourself permission to try different things, hobbies, styles, and routines. It's okay to change your mind. Identity isn't fixed, it's constantly evolving. Another thing is to try unmasking in safe places, whether it's through stimming, speaking your truth, or just resting when you need to. Every small act of authenticity helps you to solidify your inner self. Unmasking is a process and can be done on different levels with different people and in different environments. You can feel free to unwind your mind in small ways in different places, even if it's on your own at first. There's no right way or right amount to unmask. Another technique which is popular is naming your needs. Instead of pushing through discomfort, ask yourself gently, what do I need right now? This is a powerful act of self-validation and self-love. A while ago I saw a post about treating yourself like you're an animal in the zoo and also your own zookeeper, and I just love that idea so much. What enrichment do you need in your environment? What are your needs? Such important questions. At the core of what I would recommend for people who are struggling with self-worth or knowing what they need is this. Let's celebrate your authentic self, rather than trying to create a perfect social media-y version of you. You're allowed to acknowledge your progress. You're allowed to treat yourself like you're something precious and deserving of good care. Routines are most effective when they feel supportive rather than restrictive. So don't feel restricted by these suggestions. There is even more here to explore, but so much of this is a personal journey. If you found today's video helpful and you're looking for a bit more support on your journey, you are very welcome to visit my website. There's a link in the description and the pinned comment below. I offer gentle one-to-one counselling sessions where you can safely explore your sense of self if you're struggling with it. I'm also really curious to hear in the comments below, how is this video sitting with you? You can also like, subscribe, click the little bell so that you don't miss future videos if you want to. Your presence here means a lot to me, so thank you for being a part of this space, and take really good care.